Okay, so now we have a script that can change the MAC address of LAN 0 to 001122334466. Now, as you can see, this is not a great script because all we can use it for is to change the MAC address of LAN 0 to this specific MAC address. So we can't use it to change the MAC address of any other interface, and we can't change it to any other MAC address other than this one, unless you come in and manually change the code here, which is not a good practice. So a better implementation would be to use variables for the places that vary. So we have the LAN 0 here is a variable. The value of it can change depending on the interface that the person wants to use. So if you want to change the MAC address of ETH0, you can set ETH0. If you want to change the MAC address of LAN 1, if you have two wireless interfaces, then you can change for LAN 1. Therefore, this value right here is a variable, and it's better to use a variable for that. Same goes for the MAC address here. As described before, if you're actually using this in real life, you'd want to be always using a different MAC address, and you won't always want to use the same MAC address over and over. Therefore, it'll make sense to use a variable for the value of the MAC address in here as well. And what I mean by a variable is a value that can be easily changed through the user input or through the program itself. Now, variables are used everywhere in programming, in all programming languages, not only in Python, and they are very useful. You can't really write a program without a variable. So, technically speaking, a variable is a location in memory that contains a certain value. But what we actually mean by that is it's a word or a name that stores a value. Something very similar to when we use X and Y in maths. We always used variables and we always got questions in exams to find X and solve equations and all that. And all the letters in these equations are variables. So you can think of a variable as a box that contains a certain value, or as a container that contains a certain value. Now, a very simple example that I have here is we can just do in Python, set x equals 1, then x will hold the value of 1. So you can say y is equal to x plus x. That means y is equal to 1 plus 1. Then y is going to have a value of 2. And then you can print y and you'll see 2 on screen. Now this is very simple and not useful. And that's why programming can be boring if you don't have a purpose. So we're not going to be doing this. What we are going to do is adopt this in our cool script in here. So we want LAN 0 to be a variable and we want the MAC to be a variable. So all we have to do is, before we use these variables, type them in here. So we're going to create our first variable, and to create that, all you have to do is just type its name. Now, in maths, we're used to use X and Y when we're using variables. You can do that with Python, but it's not a good practice. It's better to name your variables meaningful names, so names that are relevant to the value that's stored in that variable. You can use letters and numbers in variables, but it has to start with a letter or an underscore. You can use the underscore anywhere within the variable name, and the names are case sensitive. So, since we want to use meaningful names, a very good variable name would be interface to hold the value for the interface. Now our interface is LAN 0, so we're going to initialize that to LAN 0. Now we have a variable or a box named interface, and it has a value of LAN 0. So everywhere we use LAN 0, we can just substitute interface, and Python, as it interprets the code, it will replace any occurrence of interface with the value that we set it to, which is LAN 0. Now before I use that in the code here, because this is something new, I'm going to use it in a print statement. It's actually a really good idea as you go along with coding to print stuff as you're programming, so you can see what's the value for that variable at this line or at this moment of time. So it's a good practice, and it'll actually make you understand the idea of variables more, and you'll get more comfortable with it. So first of all, I'm just going to comment all of this. Basically, commenting a line means that we're telling Python to ignore this line and don't treat it as code. To do that, all we have to do is just put the hash symbol before the line, or you can press Control and /, and that will automatically add comments to multiple lines. So whenever we run this code, all of this will be ignored. And what I want to do in here, I actually want to use a very simple print statement, and inside it, we're just going to give a notification to the user, and we're just going to say changing MAC address for, and then I want to say the name of the interface that the script will work on. So we have to use the interface variable in here. And to do that, all we have to do is append this variable to the string. So like we said before, any sequence of characters enclosed between two quotations is treated as a string, or is called a string in Python. Now, since our variable is a string as well, as you can see, it's a sequence of characters as well. So all we have to do in Python is just put a plus followed by the variable name, which is interface. And that's it. Now, when we interpret this, let's go down and do it. So if we just do python macchanger.py, you'll see it's going to print for me changing MAC address for, and instead of interface here, it replaced it with the value that we have here, which is LAN 0. Now, this is cool. But if you look at our code here, and remember what we said, we also want to use a variable for the MAC address value. So let's do that. Let's call this variable now new MAC. And let's set that to 0011223344. And we'll set it to 77 this time. So it's different than the last time. Now again, simply by doing this, we created a new variable or a new box or a new container that's called new MAC, and its value is a sequence of characters enclosed between two quotations, so it's a string. Now, let's append that to our string in here. So we have the string in the print statement, and I want to say changing MAC address for interface, so for LAN 0, to, and then put the value of the MAC, which we're going to change the current MAC address to. So again, just to append a string, all we have to do is just put a plus, followed by the rest of the string, which is we're saying changing MAC address for interface to, and then we want to put the value of the new MAC address. Again, all we have to do is put a plus, followed by the new MAC, and that's it. So all we're saying is changing MAC address for, we close the quotation, and then we put our variable, because if we put the variable inside the quotation, Python will think this is part of the string and it'll just print it as interface. It won't substitute its value with LAN 0. Same goes with using the new MAC in here. If you put that inside the quotation, it'll just treat that as a string and it won't print its value. So now if we go down and just run our code again, as you can see, it's printing changing MAC address for LAN 0, so it's substituted the value of interface with LAN 0 with the value that we initialized it to, and it's changing it to the new MAC. Again, it's substituting the new MAC variable with this. Now, just as a quick test, I know I spent a bit too much time on this, but just as a quick test, if I put the new MAC here inside the string and run this, you'll see that the interface will be substituted with the value of LAN 0, but Python will not know that new MAC is a variable. It'll just print it as part of the string because we put it inside the quotation mark. So that's it for now, just a quick introduction to variables. I wanted to show you how to use it in a print statement and get into the habit of printing the value of variables, because when you have longer code, it might be a smart idea to print it as you're writing the code to make sure that its value is still what you want it to be. In the next lecture, we'll use the variables that we just created in the code so that we can change the MAC address and the interface quickly using these variables.